is Olatunde Olaniawo, Ola for short, because I've got two Olas in the name. I come from a background of management consulting and private equity, having practiced all of that with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Accenture, and some other organizations across the globe. Working as they started Red Step Investments in the last 2 years, with Red Step we focus on Africa-focused funds into Africa. So basically linking projects to the funds.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olatunde Olaniawo. I'm the founder of the Guild of Nigerian Professionals South Africa. I'm also the founder of African Wine Circle. In my previous life, before I discovered good wines in South Africa, I used to work in private wealth management, Old Mutual. I'm passionate about Africa, but I speak a lot more on Nigeria, particularly since the fame of Boko Haram. So I talk a lot about politics and also the economy of Nigeria. So that's what we're here to do today.
You know, at this stage in my mind, in terms of size, I mean, just in sheer size, South Africa and Nigeria are the only undisputed really standalone economies that I see on the African continent. Perhaps in the future, we'll see Ethiopia emerge. Arguably, if there was an Angolan in the room, they would say, no, we are a standalone economy. And I would say that perhaps Kenya, but in terms of size, clearly South Africa and Nigeria are. But I want you to maybe just park that idea of a standalone economy and think of swing states, because the notion and the concept of swing states is very, very different to that of a standalone economy.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think the whole idea, the Nigerian, I was even saying outside before I came in that maybe Nigeria is too big to swing, in the sense that if you look at this new government, there's so much excitement about the government coming to power. But people forget that the system is still the same, in the sense that the politicians are the same. In fact, the composition of APC is almost like a pattern change or crossover, because you have the PDP guys in there. And if you look at the power play in the parliament in the last few weeks, you've had PDP members, people who had crossed from PDP, they've now taken charge in the Senate, have frustrated the new government in terms of their legislative agenda to be able to get the leadership. So when you really look at the Nigerian situation, it's very clear that Nigeria, if Nigeria sneezes, that the rest of the countries around it will cough. But what is sad about the regions, the countries that border Nigeria, is that they're still under a lot of French control. So in that sense, Nigeria really doesn't really have the influence that it should have, or it's actually haphazard. Or what also happens is, because we have constant change of government, we've had almost 10 presidents. So if you look at it, because the country is not consistent in the leadership, it makes it very difficult for Nigeria to really play that role of a positive swing state that we would like it to play.
But if I may add to what Terry and Tunji have said, from a business and commercial point of view, as to the impact of Nigeria on the sub-region and the region. Of course, we all know that Nigeria is the 7th largest oil producer in the world, and a lot of what happens in the country is affected by the swing of the price in oil. And that tends to impact on our neighbors as well, because a lot of the neighbors that border us do not actually have oil, so they depend on us for a lot of that. But a lot of things have actually happened, talking about the last government. Jonathan, they did a lot of, I believe, positive things that were not really trumpeted well enough. For example, in the area of agribusiness, agriculture, even the moods, the swing, the volatility in oil has not actually affected the price of food. But a lot of production has actually been localized. So there are lots of positive things. You know, it's just a case of this new government, for example, are basically improving on that and basically putting all the reforms that they've talked about and the reforms that were started by the previous government. They should improve on those reforms, and then the region will begin to see a change. Because whatever we do impacts on our West African neighbors, because obviously we've got scale. If there's a problem in Nigeria, it's the refugee crisis, it impacts on West Africa and the rest of Africa. Lagos alone is 20 million people. I mean, if Lagosians flowed into Republic of Benin, they'll basically swamp the country, or Togo, any of our neighbors. So it's important that we get things right, and I believe that we're on the right track.
Besides just the size and the natural pool that a country like Nigeria has, is there the political will to be a swing state within the West African context? And I think more importantly for us here on the global stage, are we going to see Nigeria taking up a leadership role where there's the political will to actually be the accepting leading country of Africa?
If our definition of swing state is that whatever happens in a country, positive or negative, impact on neighbors and the region, then if we look at Nigeria from a political leadership point of view, I don't think we're strong. But if you look at the country from a business and commercial, dynamic and entrepreneurial point of view, I think Nigeria impacts on the rest of the region.
I'm struck by the parallels of Kenya and Nigeria in the sense of two countries which have been characterized by a reputation for spectacular corruption, currently facing very serious insecurity. Are they moving roughly in the same direction in terms of addressing these challenges? And is Nigeria, because of its scale, does it have a much tougher task on its hands?
Well, with regards to Nigeria, people talk about three main languages in Nigeria, three main tribes, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, but there are lots of other interests, over 200 actually. So, I mean, unlike South Africa, whereby you find that the languages may be similar, and Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, Efik don't necessarily understand each other. So what you have basically are different people. So some people sat together in a room many years ago and said, this is Nigeria. Niger River, you draw a line. On this side you're Nigeria, on that side you're Bakassi, you're Cameroon. And then we put all these two people together. So those people had to learn to live together. So hence why some of the problems happened after independence. One part of the country was ready for independence. The north, largely feudal, conservative, they were not ready. So maybe the country would actually have been independent like in the late 50s, but was delayed by another 4 or 5 years to get the north up to speed. Incidentally, the north is where we have Boko Haram, lots of those things right now, because education was not so much of a priority, which it should have. So Nigeria has more challenges compared to Kenya. I mean, we say we have one where 170 or 180 million. We don't know.
When you look at Nigeria, the reason why the country is together is because, first of all, we've gone through a terrible civil war in 1967 to 1970. Over 1 million people died. It was a very painful civil war, and we don't want to go down that route again. Now, also, Nigeria is a generally passive people. That's why we have leaders who are ransacking the treasury, and nobody even, you will expect that we will have an Arab Spring, but we can't, because there's also a patronage system. So the guys at the top of the income, so still $1 billion, and then you dispense, almost like the Muslim Friday prayers. After mosque, you give money, alms to the poor. That's what happens in Nigeria. So what people then do is they employ about 50 people, 50 special advisors, one governor, 50 people. So that's a way of sharing the loot, right? Well, I think also what it is the major tribes, Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo, they're about 70% of the population. They're the ones who are really fighting for this power. Because if you look at how Jonathan was eased out, you have the ACN, which is the Southwest Party, and then you have the CPC, which is the Northern Party, Buhari's party. They came together, so they decided that, we have the numbers. Okay, if the Igbos are 18% don't really vote for Buhari, we'll still win. And that's what happened. Buhari is purely a tribal candidate. And also, if you look at Nigeria as the way we operate, government really doesn't have a major role. There's no electricity, 4,000 megawatts. There's no roads, there's no water. So people are used to self-help. That's why you find that people are also very interested in going into politics. People would leave lucrative businesses, put it aside, and go into politics. Because there was an instance where a guy became a chairman of a party. The first thing that happened, a generator company took a huge generator the size of this room. They sent it to his village. immediately was announced. So it's a very interesting country to study. I mean, you can almost do a PhD on Nigeria. Interesting country. But again, one good thing about Nigeria is that doom and gloom, we always bounce back.
And to take it from there, just to answer your question on what makes the country hang together, it's interest. And I agree with Tunde on most things, but I slightly disagree that Nigerians are passive. I would say, and it's important to understand the psyche of the people. Hope is a very common commodity. People believe that tomorrow will always be better. So if someone is performing an atrocity, maybe a leader, of course people do not go out into the streets, or they do not maybe make a big noise as they should, because they believe that God will punish him. You know, it's the mentality. So people do not believe in taking the law into their own hands, or actually to take their own destiny into their own hands. They believe there's a higher power which guides all of that. So you have religion as well, holding the country together. The president prays, the vice president prays, before the guy leaves the treasury prays. You know, all sorts of things happen. Yeah. So oil as well, of course. Oil basically flowed from the Niger Delta, a wealth that did not really develop the Niger Delta, did not really develop other parts of the country that should have developed, because the leaders basically siphoned the money into private pockets. But at the end of the day, there's a common interest. People, oil, people are basically intermarried, there's religion, and there's a certain aggressiveness about the Nigerian spirit as well. So there seems to be a common trend there across Africa. We look at Nigeria and Kenya. In Nigeria is a case study of one of the popular politicians who became a governor, unseated an incumbent governor who did well by building infrastructure in the state. But he introduced what they call stomach infrastructure. So what that basically meant was that he would, when he was campaigning, he would basically have bags of rice, so bags of commodities in the car, put his picture on it, brand it, name of his party, and gave it to people. Now you had a sitting governor who had built roads, hospitals, schools, but this guy won. The guy distributing rice and food. So, I mean, what do people really want? So people are basically just interested in meeting their immediate needs.
30% of our oil are siphoned off. That's a remarkable problem. When I was in PH the other day, the guy said actually, I think it's getting more and more, and heading to 40% of their oil they just lose before they can tap it on. That's a big mainstream of income for the Nigerian government that they lose. And like you say correctly, they siphon it off. And it's not the guy with a 20-gallon drum, it's the guy with an oil tanker that chips it off and sells it for double the price. The other one is the VAT at 5% that needs to change to 10% at some stage. And then lastly, the biggest problem is the fuel subsidy, like you correctly mentioned, that doesn't operate. How do you see the government handling those three aspects?
If I can just touch on these yours, like
Yes, sure.
subsidy, it's going to be very tricky that one. Because Nigerians see their only benefit from being an oil-producing nation as a subsidy.
Fuel price.
Yes. So it's just going to be trouble. It may make sense economically, fiscally, it makes sense to IMF, the World Bank, and everything economical to actually remove the subsidy. But it's going to be always a tricky one, politically for the man. I doubt he'll do it. Obasanjo was very clever about the way he did it. He was removing it gradually. He never actually said we'll remove subsidy. And I think this guy will probably take the same approach. Because people will go to arms, there'll be a lot of noise. I don't think he's going to do it. Yeah. And then you talk about value-added tax. In a way, you do have a point. Because it's easier in Nigeria to tax what comes out of the ground. What's not been easy is to tax the income that people make. Value-added tax will bring more revenue for the government. Basically, maybe they would be able to tax the bigger companies. But of course, the smaller guys, if it would translate into increased prices, people will kick against it as well. So a lot of delicate balance has to happen. And in terms of Buhari, he seems to have the will because he used to be petroleum minister. So he understands the sector quite well. But does he understand a 20th century economy, the way it runs? That's left to be seen. People are a bit jittery right now. 30 days, 31 days, maybe 32 today. He hasn't appointed ministers yet or any notable person who would speak for the government. Maybe it's going to surprise us in a few days. But he should be the most prepared leader that the country has ever had. Because the first time in the history of the country that someone would aspire for leadership and actually get it. Because he's tried 3 times. All the others always say, oh, I was sitting in my home, in my village, and people came to beg me. You know? But he actually aspired 3 times. So he should really be the most prepared leader. So we're waiting to see. People have high hopes. And we'll see what happens.